Welcome to the Stories with Traction podcast. I'm your host, Matt ZAUN. Thank you for joining us as we uncover how stories are one of the most important aspects of your business. We'll talk about struggles, victories, and how you can utilize strategic storytelling to inspire those around you to action. Enjoy this episode. Today, we're going to talk about one of the most powerful forces behind human connection, vulnerability. What is vulnerability? How can we utilize truly being vulnerable to connect with others and actually carry out our mission? Today, I'm joined by SHAWN Watkins, who is an expert in vulnerability and leadership. Welcome to the show, Carl.
Hey, Matt. Thanks a lot, man. I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. I'm excited for this conversation for multiple reasons. But one of the reasons is I feel like there's so many pictures that people have of vulnerability. So, I mean, as you know, we think in pictures. We say a word, there's all these different pictures that come up surrounding the word. And one of those words that I feel that the pictures vary greatly is vulnerability. If I walk into a room of business leaders, CEOs and executives, and I throw out that word vulnerability, it's amazing some of the feedback that I get back. And it's amazing, if they were to draw it out, what they view vulnerability, every single picture would be radically different. I mean, it wouldn't even look even close to the same. So I do want to dive a little bit into your background, but I want you to kick it off just by sharing what vulnerability is to you and why there's so many misconceptions about vulnerability. So when we say vulnerability, what's the first thing that you personally think about?
When I say vulnerability, I think of power. And of course, when you look at it from Merriam-Webster, and I think during the course of my 30 plus years of being in corporate, I've always used dictionary terms to be applicable in situations. I got that way from giving them a dictionary as a 5-year-old as a Christmas gift. So I kind of got to understand the definition of words through applying those words and not just reading definition as meaning of those words. And I think this is where I took on the understanding that vulnerability to me equals power. A lot of times people are scared, and I say shameful in the midst of not just being in a shameful category. But when you say vulnerability, it equates, and most people marry it to being shameful. Things in the closet, something you want no one to know about. And I attribute that majority to just the definition of what Merriam-Webster says. It exposes you to harm and danger. Now, if I would tell a kid that, the first thing I'm doing is instilling fear in him to exhibit that behavior. So if I'm explaining to you that this is what it exposes, the human nature automatically shuts down anything that encompasses that. I'm not going to do this because self-preservation kicks in and says fear and exposure is an issue here. So therefore, I can't let anybody see anything that I'm not in control of. And this is the suffering that is going on in with corporate leaders for so many years now.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. So, all right, so your word that immediately comes up is power. And I feel like a lot of people that don't truly understand the magnitude of what you teach, the word they see is weakness. And it's incredible because you're over here viewing power, they're over here viewing weakness. And a lot goes back to what you said. You talked about being shameful, being afraid and fearful, being exposed. And that's kind of like where our guts go to is I have to paint this picture of, I'm an awesome human being and I can't let anyone see what's really behind the curtain. And I feel like it's been very dangerous in the business world, especially from a culture perspective, like creating a culture of people that are trying to carry out a very important mission. And what's amazing to me is I've been traveling all over the country, and I love asking people what the greatest challenge they're working on is, because it really helps me in order to help them. So I really appreciate getting into those conversations. And the biggest challenge, the reoccurring challenge, is winning the talent war. I mean, every state I go to, it doesn't matter what leader I'm talking to, they talk about winning the talent war. And a lot of winning the talent war goes back to creating that incredible culture. Individuals that are tight knit, that are creating this mission bigger than themselves. And I think back to your point, Carl, that vulnerability plays a huge part in that, because if a leader's not willing and able to actually be vulnerable, if they're not willing to say, hey, I messed up here, or hey, here's my weakness, here's what I need help with. I mean, we can't be everything to everybody. I think once they're willing to do that, they're going to get so much more buy-in from their team. They're going to get a team that actually wants to really carry out their mission. We don't tend to cater to people that try to paint the perception that they're perfect. So have you seen in the last 2 years with what's happened in the world, have you seen a shift where people are more willing to accept vulnerability and the concepts of vulnerability, or do you still think it's a huge challenge?
It's twofold, Matt, when you talk about it, right? For one, the pandemic has pushed on us things that we did not want to face or even look in the mirror at. And that's in corporate America, that's in personal life, that's in relationship building, that's in networking. That is just truly how we do business. We were not afforded the opportunity to be prepared what the pandemic has presented us, right? So when I look at it from the basis of leaders, great leaders understand the balance of strength and vulnerability. And that is the thing that I use great, because I don't use great in every terminology. A lot of people use, in sports, exactly. Everybody's great. These kids come out of college, they're great. Everybody's great. Haven't accomplished anything, but everybody's great, right? They're great from the matter of they got 1 million YouTube followers, or they dunked and it was on Sports Center, right? That doesn't make you great. That's not the equivalent of it. And this is why I never use that term, and I use it, if I do, lightly with leaders, because there's a balance there. And the great leaders are finding that balance of how vulnerability, strategically and intentionally, because I use that a lot in my training. It's not a pour on session. It's not a tell me everything wrong session. It's not, this is how I grew up, woe is me session. And I think a lot of people has marrying the oversharing with vulnerability, and there has given it a bad name. The narrative is the very important part of what you have to change in thinking about vulnerability. And then changing that narrative, you have to change the mindset. In the past 2 years, the mindset of leaders have changed. They cannot operate in the same circumference of circle that they did prior to. First and foremost, the balance has shifted. We talk about the great resignation. That has truly been happening actually before the pandemic. A lot of people, numbers are said, a lot of people in 2018, 2019 started going back to school. They started going back to their dreams, trying to chase those dreams, prepare to those dreams, and try to go and live those dreams. A lot of those dreams had to do with them changing their work and the work culture they were in. So the pandemic just pushed us to that point. Yes, it has become a little bit more than a buzzword. It is now actually becoming a reality. And I'm so happy, because it has been a buzzword to me for 30 years. I've been talking about vulnerability in the workplace my whole working career. I guess because how I am, the diversity that I am, and some of the issues that I've faced in the essence of promotions and those things, being vocal, sharing feelings, which most leaders wouldn't. I kind of got pushed around as, I don't know if you really want to be led by that guy. But I'm a military vet. I know what it means to fight. And I have a lot of charisma and understanding that you need people to help you get where you're going. And you can't alienate people if you want to get to the destination. And this is what we have allowed to happen to us in the course of corporations. We've allowed the alienation, and nobody has spoke up about it and said, we're not going to do that at this company. We're not gonna have someone that's been here 40 years and they're going to be a closed door to someone I hire with great innovation, great energy, and great skills to move this company forward. And I think that's the biggest change that we're starting to experience with companies and leaders taking on this big response to being vulnerable in the workplace.
It's a fantastic point. So first, you had mentioned that you're a veteran. Thank you so much for your service. I greatly
Thank you for your
appreciate it.
support.
One of the things that came up when you had mentioned that you're a veteran is last year I read a book by Brene Brown. And in the book, she had talked about vulnerability. And she did extensive studies with military personnel across all different aspects of the military. And the consensus was vulnerability was so closely linked with courage. A lot of people don't tend to think about that, but when you think of some of the pictures we have in our minds of veterans that are fighting for their mission, they are in a combat situation, they are putting themselves in an extremely vulnerable state. And I could see how it could be linked with that courageous act. And one of the things I really want to get through to everyone that's going to listen to this episode is to really reframe your perspective regarding vulnerability. We had started off saying a lot of people view it as weakness and shame and fear and exposing, but I really appreciate what Carl's mentioning about power and about how it's a courageous act. And it really ties in with sound leadership. I think there's been a really bad rap regarding business leadership in the last couple decades for numerous reasons. I think Hollywood, pop culture really paints the business world as evil or dark, and there's a lot to work through. I mean, great movies, at least movies that sell a lot of tickets, don't tend to paint leaders of businesses as incredible do-gooders in the community, giving back to people. I mean, that's not a riveting story that's going to sell tickets. So they tend to really focus in on the dark and the evil and the manipulation aspect of it. And I think it's really created this not, it's not a realistic picture. Because Carl and myself, I mean, we work with business leaders all the time that are doing incredible things for the world, for their communities, and it's in order for them to carry out their mission, they have to be more vulnerable. So, Carl, do you want to take a little bit of a step back? I know your background to me is absolutely fascinating. I think you've done a ton in the last few decades. I mean, and from all over the map. And I feel like your experiences, because they're so varied, actually puts you in an incredible position to relate with even more people and to actually be more vulnerable with more people because of your background. So can you tell us a little bit about how you even got into this field in the first place? So take us back. Let's say you had mentioned, your work within the last 30 years. So take us back, for the last 3 decades. What are some of the things that you've done that's really, really put you in a position to help the most amount of people when it comes to vulnerability?
I think it actually, I mean, if I could push it back even to the beginning, it began at birth, man, August 27th, 1967. That's really where we can go back to that. I had a father who was in the Black Panthers. I'm not a radical dude, but that was the time in which they grew up in. And I had a mom that marched with King before he was assassinated. So I had some kind of upbringing, a principle to what to stand on. By me being African American, man, a lot of those things were ingrained in me from my dad that you can't be a statistic. The neighborhood that I grew up in, they was putting 25 years on the Black males in the neighborhood between gangs, violence, drugs. They wasn't expecting you to get past 25 years old. So I came from a place of strength and grit. So in that, I learned a lot of things streetwise. And I was also a nerd. As I told you, I got a dictionary as a Christmas gift because I love to read. And stories took me out of Chicago. It took me out of the ghetto that I grew up in. It took me away from the slum and the bad things that I saw. And it gave me a season of purpose to say, there's something beside this one block that you grew up on. There's something here in the side beside this winos on the corner, standing in front of the liquor store begging for change. There's more to the world than what you're seeing in this neighborhood. And in the midst of that, I just fell into reading and how I began that purpose of understanding that people apply words to them based upon what the dictionary tells them they mean. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to rewrite Webster's. But what I'm saying is that the understanding of a word takes on different meaning to who it's applied to. And I started to understand it as a young age in conversations and talking, because I stayed around older people. Talking to older people, I started getting some framework of mind of how people think, how people deal, what makes them happy, what makes them sad. I understand degrees up to where you can question, where you can get answers, how you can get answers. And you say, oh man, you're pretty smart for a kid. I think it was just a level of my curiosity that drove me to why a lot of people are living unsatisfied lives. And I noticed that early on because I saw such a plight in the neighborhood that I grew up in. So that's to carry the basic foundation of that. But when I went into work, I cultivated that same thing. I asked a lot of questions. I worked for one temp agency for 4.5 years, and I did 9 assignments. And he said to me, when you look at that in the variance of understanding that someone is going to hire you, why weren't you able to make any of those a permanent position? Okay, that's the bad part of that. The good part of that is that in those 9 positions, I worked with so many variants of leaders and CEOs, and I established so much understanding and knowledge. And not only that, I worked for 4 or 5 Fortune 400, 500 companies in the midst of those assignments. So I had been placed in a place where there was a diverse culture, there was a diverse knowledge, and there was a diverse understanding of how leaders do things. And it also ranged from the jobs I did, from finance to mortgage, to accounting, to collections. So there was a lot of things in there. So when I look at someone's background and I say, oh, okay, you've had 9 jobs, or you've been in this place, you had 9 jobs in 7 months. There's no more looking at that as a asterisk or a star by that individual's name. I can't say what happened in those, as long as there was no periods of indiscretion or something that would leave a bad taste in my mouth. I can only look at that from a positive and say that this guy got a lot of experience in a lot of things. And what can I utilize with them, all of that talent, to make him an asset for me? And that's where I really went into the works of that. And I started talking to leaders and I started carrying on conversations, and not as in sales, but just in curiosity and understanding. And I started getting this thing that no one wants to be vulnerable. Leaders didn't want to share with their underlings for the fear of them taking their positions. No one led with the power of encouragement and direction with leaders. We think we directed them because we tell them, okay, I need these reports. I need these numbers. I need these figures. That's not directing people. That's not leading people. Leading people is giving them an opportunity to grow, present to you the innovation and character that they are. Put them in situations and circumstances where they can develop things that you never thought of. That's what a leader does. A leader gives space for creativity, for vulnerability, for mistakes to happen, for growth to happen. These are the things that really sit on the neck of leaders in today's corporate world. There's the fear that, oh, he's here to take my job. You know how many times I trained people that took my job? 4 times in the midst of my 30 years. I trained my successor, and I didn't hold back. I kept no secrets. I didn't train them this way and kept all the goodies for me. How I would did the job and how I did the job and performed the job, I showed them every single way. And a lot of people say, man, you crazy. Man. You teaching them your job? You know they tell you your job. Absolutely, because I want the individual to know that you had all the right tools to complete the job that I was giving you. And that looked better on me than any encompass of me shortchanging that individual, trying to stick it to the corporation.
Yeah, I appreciate you mentioning all that. And there was a lot to unpack with what you said. And I'm focusing in on all the different experiences that you had that really led you to where you are today, right? So that you have all these different experiences and you're able to speak to a lot more people because of those. But one of the things I want to focus in on, you had mentioned Martin Luther King Jr. So one of the most amazing human beings I've ever had the opportunity to work with in my career was a gentleman by the name of Harry Lewis Jr., who he is an absolute legend in our area. I mean, he's done so many things for so many people. It's actually difficult to go anywhere with this gentleman because if you go somewhere with him, there's going to be dozens and dozens and dozens of people anywhere where you go in my community that are going to stop him because they have a story with Harry. They have something that he did for someone. I mean, all the different things that he's done. And he's really helped change for the better thousands and thousands of lives in the area that I live in. And so Harry had personal conversations with Martin Luther King Jr., personal one-on-one conversations. So he was raised in the South during the civil rights movement, and he has told me about some of these meetings, some of these conversations, one in particular where Martin Luther King Jr. was sitting across from the table from him. Imagine one-on-one, and he's sharing information with him. He's sharing his vision with him, and Harry took that vision and he implemented it. And the community that I live in is so much better because of Harry. It's been incredible. And one of the things that, while you were talking, Carl, and one of the things that I think back regarding Harry and then ultimately MLK was this ability, when we talk about power, to be so vulnerable that the connection runs so deep. And years ago, I did some pretty intensive study regarding MLK's speeches. I think a lot of people consider him one of the best orators in the last century. And one is to ask themselves, why is that the case? Why was this individual able to get up in front of an audience and almost have a supernatural ability to hold an audience in the palm of his hand and create such a powerful, inspirational moment? And I think a lot of that goes back to vulnerability. So I always encourage people to do deeper study into his ability to connect. Often people will quote, the "I Have a Dream" speech, but there's so many speeches that he gave that were on a completely different level, especially for his time. And the deeper you go, I mean, there have been so many talks where he's walking up the stairs to get on a platform to speak in front of people, and someone will hand him something. And this is the first time he's seen it. And he has literally moments to take the information, digest it in his mind, and then utilize this information to inspire an audience. And so much of it goes back to vulnerability. MLK had the ability to literally put it all out there and be completely vulnerable in those moments. And he was able to capture audiences. And so many leaders would look at him saying, "Oh my goodness, I'd love to be able to speak like that." But yet they're not willing to be vulnerable. So they go hand in hand. And the same thing's true with Harry. I mean, if you've ever heard Harry Lewis speak, his ability to capture an audience, it all goes back to that vulnerability. He's actually one of the most vulnerable human beings I've ever personally met. And a lot of that came from a lot of the things he learned from MLK. And Carl, I put you in the exact same category because I've had the opportunity to be on your show. I've had the opportunity to see you speak. And the way you connect, the way you present yourself, the way you're able to utilize, I mean, you talk about power. I mean, there's a boldness to it. You're able to step out into boldness with your vulnerability. And I think that's such an incredible thing to have. And so many people are envious of it, but yet it goes back to, if you're willing to be vulnerable and put it out there, that's what's going to create that unbelievable connection with other people. So I want to talk about practicality for a moment. With all that said, so there are CEOs, executives, business leaders that have the great titles to back up their, what they do. They're going to be listening to this. And what would you tell them in the months ahead to start focusing on regarding vulnerability, just for them to be cognizant of it, just for them to start thinking about it more? What are some practical things that you would recommend that they do right out of the gate? They listen to this conversation, and what do they do in the months ahead to start implementing this?
I would take them through my program. And when I say that, I just say on a worldwide level, because not that my program is just so much, but it's so much that I put into it that I know it works because I've lived it. I just have 4 steps, and I share that a lot of shows I'm on and talk with a lot of CEOs. And the first step I would give you is an introduction. That introduction or reintroduction, if you went down this road before, the introduction is just introducing yourself to the core values that make you you, not someone else's, not vision statements on walls of corporations that you work at, but the core values that you believe in, that you would stand for, that you would fight for. Those core values. Reintroduce yourself to those. I'd rather say reintroduce, because a lot of people have forgotten. A lot of people have forgotten what they even stand for. They've been in this rat race of just working and trying to produce figures and trying to boost careers and trying to get educated and all of these other things. And they've forgotten the core values. 2, I would say, Break bad habits. Those things that create the bad habits that you continue to fulfill, and those things that are not part of your core values. You're picking up habits of others that don't lead like you lead. You're seeing examples of bad leadership and you're adopting that as your mantra. Break those bad habits. And once you do that, anyone knows that bad habits have to be replaced by good habits. And that move forward. Move forward to from step one into all those core values that make you who you are. Move forward in operating in those values. Whether it be thinking, changing mindset, whether it be even changing the culture of where you work. Or one of the greatest ones that I put to leaders, change the culture that you're in. That is a key thing. If you can change the culture that you're in, you'd be surprised how many people already want to be different. You'd be surprised how many people want to do more for you. But the culture has strangled them to where they can't perform up to their value. And the fourth one is the breakthrough. The breakthrough is just that. After you've operated through steps 1, 2, 3, the breakthrough is there. You'll start to see the release of those things that have held you down. The shame, the guilt, the fear of not belonging, the expectations, the previous experiences and traumas. You'll start to work through some of those things through this 4-step plan. And that's my teaching, that's my training, that's my workshops. I do it for corporate, I do it one-on-one, and I do groups. And the only thing that changes is the platform. But those 4 points, and they're on repeat and repeat. My mom used to say this when she had to repeat stuff to her. She's like, don't make me repeat and repeat. I never knew who those guys was, but she always made a point of saying that. And we knew she was saying to us that she's not going to say it again. Those, when you get to step 4, breakthroughs are at multiple levels. So you're going to repeat, so to speak. You're going to go back to 1. Once you go up to that flight of stairs and you've accomplished 1 through 4, there's going to be a new set of things that you're going to have to reevaluate your values on. You're going to have to break bad habits of what you used to do or what you've seen done. You're going to have to move forward with good things that'll replace those bad things. And then you're going to work those things in until it's a breakthrough again. And this is what I would tell leaders to do. And in the simplicity of doing it, evaluate yourself. Evaluate yourself. Evaluate what you're thinking. Mindset, definitely. I know a lot of people say it. A lot of people buzzword it. Mindset is key. Because if I have $100 and I think that I'll put this $100 and win the lottery, that's how I get rich. Okay, that's one mindset. If I have $100 and say, okay, I'm going to break this up into $25 4 ways, and I'm going to divide this into workers who's going to be able to bring me leads. That's a different mindset. But they're both trajectories to trying to get $1 million, right? But how successful you think you're going to be hitting the lottery? So the mindset is what really changes our outcomes. And until we change the narrative of what we think vulnerability is, we'll be trapped by what vulnerability is not. And vulnerability is not fear. It's not judgment. It's not shame. It's power.
All right. So I really like those 4 steps. I just want to, for clarity's sake, I want to run through them.
Yes.
I'll actually give you a very brief example in my own life, taking through these steps. So in 2020, I gained a significant amount of weight. I was super stressed out. It led to me eating to check out due to the stress. It led to me drinking way more than I probably should have. So I gained a very large amount of weight in 2020. So toward the end of 2020, I reached out to a nutritionalist, actually a good friend of mine who lives very close to me. And I asked her for help. Basically, I have to change. I have to change. And she took me through. So I'm going to actually take people through these steps based on that example. You had said the introduction. So 1, the introduction, talk about core values. One of the things that my fitness coach, my nutritionalist asked me to do was I threw out a value and she asked me to go 5 layers deep. So she continued to say, why, right? So it really dove into the whole heart of why I was doing what I was doing. At the start of this, I thought I was losing weight to fit into a certain pant size. But she said, why are you losing the weight? Okay, well, I'm losing the weight because of X, Y, and Z. But we went deeper and deeper and deeper. And the reason was because I was messing up with my eating habits and it could be affecting my family in the future because of my poor health. So when we got 5 layers deep, it was actually because of my family, to be more energetic with my young kids, to actually do as good as I possibly could in my work, to have a clear mind for my clients. So that was when we went those layers. So based on what you had said, Carl, core values, that was my core value. Then she talked about breaking those bad habits. That goes back to what you had talked about, breaking those bad habits. And then I replaced them with good habits and a different lifestyle. And it changed the game for me. So in 2021 and now in 2022, those good habits have completely drowned out the bad habits. And then it led to a surge in breakthrough. So it led to me actually dropping the weight, but actually focusing more on my health than the weight, which was awesome. And it really went through the cycle, almost to what you had said, that breakthrough happened. And then it's almost like I had to start it over again. I had this breakthrough in this one area, and then now I got to work on X, Y, and Z. And it kept going and going. It was almost like a positive vicious cycle, if you will. So what I just described to you, is that along the lines of going through those 4 steps?
That is absolutely the lines. And I didn't know how much time you had, so I wanted to shoot those steps out to you. Those are exactly what I'm talking about. Those are exactly the steps and how the direction they are taken. And I say that from a fact of live. And if someone could bring those to you in a way that you had, because I have the Y system as well. And the Y system, I really just got that as a kid, because whatever my mom said, by her telling me, because I said so, never worked with me. It got me into a lot of trouble as a kid. It got me smacked in the mouth a couple of times because I was quick. I was quick-witted and talky and smart. So a lot of times, like she said, because I said so, and I would pop off with, but that's not an answer. Yes, it got me into trouble, and if anyone knows this, that would come up in those times, you definitely can agree with what I'm saying. But the key to it is that you're really peeling off the onion, the layers. So those 4 steps are the 4 steps. If I was to do an outline, those are the outline. But up under those are the underlying means. And the why is going to keep you, which it does for you. It took you from a place of saying, okay, I'm a size 40. I need to get back into these 36 or 30s or, whatever the pant size is. That was what you had in mind with losing the weight. But now, since I've kept you into a place of trying to figure out why, what's the purpose behind it? Because I'm sure you want to lose the weight for more reasons just to fit into the genes that you could fit into before the pandemic. So now I want you to get an understanding, and it goes back to mindset, and that's so tremendously great. I don't think we really harness the power that we have in our minds. We do for foolishness, but we don't do it for the development of our personal selves. We do it to enhance our abilities to create for others. But oftentimes we lose that same power when it comes to ourselves. And that's in the personal development space. And that's where you were at. There were things that you were unhappy with, but you didn't deal with. There were things that were unsatisfactory to you, but the food had to come from somewhere. You didn't just automatically get an appetite. All of that is a derivative of you being unhappy and in a place where you wanted some change to come, and it wasn't happening. So that's where the smartness in her gave you that why system. And that's what this program exactly does. It just puts you into a system of asking yourself those questions that normally on a day-to-day basis, you would not ask yourself because you're so clouded with the cares of life. And that's what I love to call them, the cares of life. And no matter whatever it does, all of us have them, the personal, business, pleasure. In those 3 categories, there are cares that we have. And those are the things that really walks it through there for you. You did the process, wonderfully. You took the bad habits, started identifying those things that made you feel like they did. You start identifying those things that made you want to change the way you were living. And then you replace them with the things you should have been doing, the things that you want to do and never did, the things you enjoy to do, and now you're really putting them as a part of your life. And the breakthrough is nothing but the fruits of the spirit, seeing those things inactive, seeing those things working and manifesting themselves, and you seeing a release, because that's just what a breakthrough is. It's a release from a place where you are that you don't want to be.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so the reason why I immediately reached out to this nutritionalist was it was like a knee-jerk reaction. It was things are opening back up. Now I need to go wear a suit again. I can't fit in my suits. So I reached out because I was in panic mode. Oh, this is not a good situation to be in. But then I learned that there's a deeper thing. There's a much deeper issue. And it really went back to my health, my personal well-being. I wasn't as energetic as I could be for my children, and it was affecting that and this. And so it started from a moment of, oh no, what do I do? And then the deeper we got, I realized that it's an even bigger issue. And I think a lot of times that happens with companies where their immediate response is, we're not winning the talent war. We can't hire top talent. What's happening? Our business is going down in a blaze. We need to do what? We need to change culture. And I think a lot of what you had talked about with implementing these concepts and actually having this culture of vulnerability is going to be so much. They think it's one thing, but it goes much deeper than that. And I'm confident, based on everything that I've seen in the last year or so that I've been connected with you, Carl, that you're able to really help them regarding that vulnerability. So for those, for individuals that want to reach out to you and they want to connect with you, where are some of the places that they can immediately go to find out more about you and to connect with you, to talk about this vulnerability on a much deeper level?
Oh, well, they can do it to my website, carlshawnwatkins.com. It's very simple, very easy to get to. You can see a lot of my work there. You can find me on my LinkedIn profile, that as well. See me on Instagram. I'm starting to come a little bit over to that area because I see it is a great place to kind of show your vulnerability. The reels are a perfect place to show your vulnerability, a perfect place to not only put your products in and your action in, but to actually see people see you. And a lot of times we don't see that on social media sites. We see people showing you who they want to be. We see people showing you who they propose to be. But I love Instagram for the simple fact that there's reels there that you can be simple, be playful, you can be curious, and people will actually see you and get a taste of you. I think that's very important because people do business with people that they want to do business with, right? And they do business with people. So yes, you may have the greatest of whatever you may have, but if I don't see you as an individual I want to do business with, I can care less about what you're selling me. So those are two areas that you can really find me. I do a lot of work on LinkedIn. I create a lot of space for that. And over the past 2+ years, I've really built a substantial platform, actually about 12,000 followers on there. I know I'm not as great as most, but out of those, I got about 11,000 plus connections. So they're not about the numbers, they're about connections, and they're about strides that I've made to actually connect with people and harness what the people are saying concerning vulnerability.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I recommend everyone to follow Carl on LinkedIn. You produce incredible content, very thought-provoking content and concepts that I've implemented myself. So I can absolutely speak to that. In order to help people better from a convenience standpoint, I will include all of those in the show notes. You can just go right to Carl's website. You can connect with him on LinkedIn from there. So I'll absolutely have those in the show notes. So Carl, thank you so much for your time today. I know you're a very busy man. Thank you for everything that you shared regarding vulnerability. I feel like we covered a lot, and I very much appreciate it. And I'm confident that if people start implementing this in their organizations, they will actually see those breakthroughs that you had talked about. They're going to see breakthroughs like they never thought possible because of leading into that vulnerability. So thank you so much for your time today.
Man, thank you for having me, Matt. You have a blessed week, man.
Thank you for listening to the Stories with Traction podcast. If you have a story that you would like to share, feel free to drop an email to matt@mattzahn.com with the subject line Stories with Traction. Also, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, where I share tons of resources on how you can be a better storyteller. Remember, if you want to persuade with power and inspire those around you to action, you must share more stories.